Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. Here's your host, Chris Lee. Commodore fans, on your feet. It's time to anchor down.
Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast presented by Dr. Jody Jones, DDS. We are part of the 440 Sports Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today is Vanderbilt play-by-play man Andrew Allegretta. We'll talk about wins. Yeah, that's right, win. We haven't had a lot of those to talk about on the podcast the last few years, but Vandy got a couple, of course, with the football win at Kentucky, and then the road win in hoops against Temple. Now, we didn't get to talk as much about the latter as I would have liked. Andrew was on a little bit of a time crunch, and we spent a lot of our time on football and in the mailbag. But in any case, we did what we did, and I think there's something there for everybody. Andrew appears on the guest line that's presented by Michael Kendrick of the Kendrick Group. Michael's a local carpenter and a lifelong Vandy fan. He builds bookshelves, cabinets, picture frames, furniture, and made-to-order items, including a display case for my prized Dale Murphy jersey. I've seen Michael's work. He's a true craftsman. If you are in the market for custom woodwork, give Michael a call at 615-830-9458. Now on to our interview with Andrew Allegretta. Andrew Allegretta joins us today. Today being Thursday, it's a cold morning. You have been out on the practice field scouting things out because you're from Maine and you can handle that. But the bigger question is this, Andrew. We got a huge football win to discuss.
Yes.
We got a really nice basketball win on the road. I mean, this is uncharted territory for the podcast. All this is happening at once. What do we do with ourselves here?
We take a moment, we reflect, we appreciate it. It will come again, but you just don't know. If you actually want the real reason I was out at practice, and it was twofold, yes, to scout and watch the team and so on and so forth, but the other reason is I must be the most injury-prone broadcaster in America because yesterday I smashed my finger in a car door, and I needed verification on whether or not I broke my finger or bruised my finger. And the good news is the training staff says it's broken, or bruised. I was so teed up for it to be broken that's where my brain still is, but bruised finger. So we'll find out how effectively you can call a game with a bruised finger in a couple of days.
How does one smash one's finger in a car door, or do we want to know?
Because I'm an idiot, Chris. What are you talking about? Because I was putting one thing in with one hand and closing the door with the other, and cars, unless you know the drill, if you open the car up to a certain point, it holds, but if you don't open it all the way to that point, it will start to close itself. So, I had opened it to a certain point where I thought it would stay. It wouldn't. So as I was letting go of the car door, I was still, with the other hand, dropping what was a grocery bag in the front seat and so on and so forth. And again, I'm an idiot, Chris. So I smashed my finger in the door.
There's just too much multitasking going on this time of year.
I'm not good at multitasking. So
no, I'm not either.
Yeah. So here we are. But
well, we will attempt to. Yeah. I was going to say we'll attempt to multitask here today without hopefully inflicting further injury.
Yeah, we'll find out.
If you can hurt yourself on a podcast, let's hope it doesn't happen. But if you do, I'd like to know how. So
I feel like
anyway,
you might have a sponsor for me.
We could. We do have a personal injury lawyer.
That's
so
right.
There is that. So if you want to sue the manufacturer, I can tell you a good number to call.
Right. All right, Vandy.
But well, hey, here's my flip from that. Vandy put a hurting on Kentucky and Lexington.
There you go. It was, there was a lot that was wonderful about that game for Vanderbilt's standpoint, and obviously, it's hard not to start with. Look, just being around the guys and the coaching staff enough. You understand the work that they're going through, the care level that they have, the effort that they're putting into this, and to see them rewarded was really nice. I think what I said at the end of the broadcast was effectively, we've seen the work, we've seen the progress, but there's a difference between progress and an identifiable result, and they finally got their identifiable results. And you could see the emotion from head coach Clark Lee. There's a lot that's going into this for this team right now. So first and foremost, just the sense of catharsis that game brought to the players and the coaching staff. That's the best thing about it, just to begin with. They've got to build, they've got to turn the page, and Clark knows that as well as anybody. But in that moment, in that singular moment, the catharsis was for sure real.
Do you ride the plane with the team on the way up and back?
90% of the time, yes. I did not go with the team to Kentucky for unnecessary reasons to get into. It was a drivable trip, and I had some other stuff. So I did not on this trip.
Well, I'm sure you were around the team in other instances, before, after, whatever that looked like. What was the mood behind the scenes like? I mean, I know that Clark Lee tries to keep an even keel and even said this week that we're going to approach the Florida game as if we lost the Kentucky game. And so I get all those things, but look, these guys aren't dumb. It's been a while since they won a game like this. That had to be just a huge release of emotions and all sorts of things. You could see it on Clark Lee's face for sure in the post-game interview, and I'm sure you saw that elsewhere too.
Well, so I didn't travel with the team, but I did go down to the locker room after the game just to check in and see and say congratulations and all that kind of stuff. And, I'm getting a few hugs from people, which, when the broadcaster starts getting a few hugs from people, you can tell the sense of, again, it's one part jubilation, it's one part relief. You could feel the relief inside that locker room, the celebration, the jubilation, the joy, but again, the relief. Because I think everyone, again, in that locker room just recognized that the moment would come. Who knew if it was going to be in Lexington or, a couple of weeks ago in Columbia, whatever, it happened. And again, the music was loud, the hooping and the hollering was loud. The post-game meal, which was Mexican for what it's worth, was as good as it's ever tasted all season long. You know what I'm saying? So it was just a happy moment down there in the locker room heading toward the buses. You could just, again, feel kind of this joy spread around everywhere. And that was nice. It was shared joy.
One of the things I think that deserves highlighting coming out of this game was the job that A.J. Blazek has done. I wrote this morning they were down 3 starters. They've only got one guy starting in the same spot he started against Hawaii. That's center Julian Hernandez, who's been hurt at times this year. I'm just blown away at the job that A.J. Blazek has done with the line that we didn't think was going to be very good, and that was with everybody healthy. I think he's done probably the best job of all the assistants on the staff to this point.
Well, I'll let Clark evaluate kind of the pecking order there. But in terms of the job AJ's done, I mean, I think if you're around him a little bit, and I think I've noted to you that he was, I rode the offensive line bus quite a bit in Hawaii. So I was around AJ some, and he and I have been, first off, he's a friendly guy. So he's kind of friends with everyone. But he and I have been friendly since he got here, and he's infectious with his personality, his positivity. He seems like a really good fit for here, right? Smart guy, high energy guy, positive guy, not one of these like old crunchy, beat you up sort of offensive line coaches, which probably would not go well at the moment with people that need, a helping hand to get themselves up and over the current mountain that they're climbing. I'm not surprised that he's done a good job. And like, to your point, it's been a rotation on that line, whether it's, Hernandez going down a little bit, whether it's, Xavier Castillo, who's been out, whether it's been Ben Cox, who's been out, Pitchford, who's been out. I'm going to leave somebody out. Ashmore's done for the season. The only people that feel like they've kind of been there all season long is, like you said, Hernandez went down. Jacob Brammer for the most part, and you could kind of fill me in on perhaps which game he missed or moved or whatever it is. He feels like he's kind of been the right tackle for the better part of the season, but it was Ketchit was playing a lot of right guard in the Kentucky game, which
played
is not somebody that was
and he hadn't played a snap all year until Saturday. Yeah.
I mean, he was like on your radar as somebody that could come in case somebody got hurt, but that was sort of about it, in the same way that Trent Weaver is on your radar as somebody that could come in case somebody gets hurt. But I do think most offensive line coaches these days do as good of a job as they can, sort of like basketball or like Tim Corbin, cross-training through multiple positions, so that if they're typically the right guard and the left guard gets hurt, they can slide, or perhaps you can go from right guard to right tackle, or whatever your skill sets lend itself to. His coaching knowledge is, whatever. He's an Iowa football player, comes from that tree, knows that sort of tough physical mindset, but he does it in a way that's very befitting of these young men right now.
Well, I think the other guys that have done a good job coaching, Larry Black and Javon Hay, because, again, the defensive line was not supposed to be a position of strength. And I'm not saying it is, but you look at what they have done with what they have. Again, expectations were not super high, even with Davion Davis, who has not played a snap this year. The star position, I've gone blank on the kid's name. He's from South Carolina. Miles Capers got hurt before the season. So you're like, two starting defensive linemen have not played a snap this year.
Which does not include Devin Lee, who is out for the better part of the season.
Yes.
I'm gonna blank on a couple of other guys, but that defensive line was a position of erosion early on, where you got a lot of BJ Diakate. You had, Darren Ogg, who is very talented, and I think he's earned himself a lot of snaps. But that's still a freshman that was asked to do more than a typical freshman. There's a lot of coaches that I think, and again, right, like you go through the grind of a season, and again, to no fault of anybody, right? Like all you get are these hyper tangible black and white things like win or lose or yards or negative yards or whatever. And not to be like the eye test guy, right? Because at a certain point, the eye test is the record. And I know we've talked about it too, Chris, like identifiably the talent is better right now. There's not enough of it. Nobody's denying it. There's not enough SEC depth of talent on this football roster, but they have done a really good job augmenting the players that they've got and putting themselves in a position to be successful to the best of their ability. Not to say that they've been perfect. I'm sure there's plays and moments that they would like back. I mean, how badly would they like the last sequence of Missouri back?
Oh man,
I don't know if they would, right? Like, I don't know if they would call it differently. I'm just saying, like, wouldn't we all like a do-over there, or for the better part of the Missouri game, right? Where it was just, it took a while to get out of some cyclical stuff. But, the other thing too is, if I may revert to cliches, styles make the fights. And there's been a lot of stylistical challenges. A weakness of this team obviously has been out on the perimeter, and there's plenty of teams in this conference with the speed at receiver to take advantage of it. And Kentucky, what was interesting about the Kentucky matchup through and through is, like, stylistically, that's not their thing. They're not going to run and shoot like Tennessee is going to do or whatever. And they're not going to necessarily, they've got an NFL quarterback, but that's not how they get after you. They've got Brown, the kid from Nashville. They've got a few guys that can absolutely challenge you out on the perimeter, but they don't start there. They start with Chris Rodriguez and kind of a more, quote unquote NFL style passing game or whatever. So that allows you to stay in the fight. Like, Kentucky didn't challenge Vandy's defense in the same way that others have to expose Vandy's defense. That doesn't mean that Vandy didn't play well. They did. Like, for the first half, Chris Rodriguez was 2.7 yards per carry, which would have been by far, if it held, his lowest yards per carry average in a game this season. Obviously, he rips off the 72-yarder, and that's sort of what those running backs like Eddie George do. They wear you down, and then they pop you for an 80-yarder. But they never – and the other thing about it, too, is Kentucky's offensive line has not been good this season. There's really no two ways around it. They're last in the conference in giving up sacks, and it shows. Christian James gets a sack. Michael Lewusu gets a sack. Like guys that have, have been good for Vanderbilt, but not necessarily pressure makers getting to Will Levis. And Levis goes for 109. There's some weaknesses in Kentucky's team, their offensive line, and there's some stylistical differences with the way Kentucky plays. And again, just the moment of the season for Kentucky where perhaps the balloon deflates against Tennessee. And there was some things set up within this, which when you go back and look at it in hindsight, you go, oh, okay, I can kind of see how this comes together. But they also, I think, to Vandy's credit, found a way to manage an offense with Mike Wright as the quarterback as well as they've done all season, right? They got Ray Davis going. They were in third down and shorts. They converted their third and shorts. They converted a couple of third and 11s. They did Mike did a pretty good job running the football. It felt like the most, it felt like the puzzle came together in terms of how you would want to run the offense with Mike Wright at quarterback, because there's such a difference between Mike and AJ, and like you're oscillating between the two. And it felt like they found a sweet spot with Mike. So that whole answer is to not discredit the way that Vanderbilt played, but what it does say is the style of the fight provided an open door for Vanderbilt, and they busted right through it.
Yeah, before I flip to offense and talk about Mike for just a minute, I think three guys on the defensive line particularly deserve a shout-out. That's Nate Clifton, Christian James, Mike Lewusu. Yeah, Clifton blocked a field goal, which may have been kind of the underrated biggest play of the game. Because that made a huge
24-21 win.
Exactly. But and I get they kind of wore out because they don't have depth. But those guys all, I'll just use a cliche here, stayed in the fight, for lack of a better way to put it. But the guy who's really popping to me is C.J. Taylor. Like, you were at practice with me in August, and he was just making play after play after play. And he looked up and you just said, I don't know exactly what they do with him, where they play him. He's sort of a guy without a position. Too big too small to be a linebacker. Safety was spoken for at the time. They figured out ways to get him on the field more and more. And my goodness, I don't think he's leaving the lineup until he's done at Vandy.
Leads the team in tackles in that game with 6 of them, which is kind of interesting, right? That you lead the team in tackles with 6 against Kentucky, but that's, I think Kentucky ran 50-something plays to Vanderbilt's like 60-something plays. So that's part of the reason. Intercepts the final pass from Will Levis. I mean, clearly his athleticism, his speed, his intuition, his football feel is really, really high. And because he's made some plays throughout the course of the season, what is it? A couple of interceptions, a couple of, is it at least 2 interceptions?
I think it's 1 pick and 2 fumble returns for scores.
Okay. All right. But regardless, he's made some plays, right? So his confidence is growing, and he can play with a little bit more authority. He doesn't feel like the world's biggest guy, like you said, but his athleticism and his confidence are growing, and it's nice to have a local kid, relatively speaking, from McMinnville, performing for Vanderbilt. That's a great thing.
I thought Mike Wright played really, really well. There were some mistakes. He got bailed out on one of them, but there were also big plays. The 59-yard touchdown run, the throw to Skinner to set it up, the throw to Shepard to win it. I'm very curious to see how they handle quarterback against Florida, because I think Mike is their best matchup against a defense that really struggles against the run.
I don't know. I would say a lot of that has to do with AJ's health going into that game. To that point, I don't have, any additional information, not to be dodgy. I just don't, nor am I going to go bother the training staff. Hey, how's AJ doing? They'd punch me in the face, or they'd slam my finger in the car door again. I don't know. I think, I was watching some of Florida's game against South Carolina yesterday. They worry me from an athleticism standpoint. They're just fast and they're long. And I think one thing that the coaching staff here internally at Vandy notes, and to Billy Napier's credit, that's a first-year coaching staff, right? And there's been some roster turnover and some guys have been kicked off the team and so on and so forth. And they've lost some games. They've won some games, right? But statistically, they're pretty darn disciplined. They lead the conference in penalties. They lead the conference in turnover margin. So you've got an athletic team that's long, that can make plays, and for the most part has been pretty disciplined and can turn you over. So I don't know. I don't know who becomes your best fit or whatever. I think clearly what is your best model is what you just did against Kentucky, which is, I think it was 9 drives, and I think 3 of them were 3 plays or less. So that means 6 of them were fairly lengthy drives, and there was like 3 or 4 10-play drives, which means a lot of Ray Davis, all of that sort of stuff. But Mike's got to be smart. Mike can't throw the interception. I mean, he talked about getting bailed out. Look, Vandy earned the win, but they also got bailed out on the pick that Mike Wright threw on 4th down and whatever with the illegal hands to the face, right? Like, they got bailed out there. So, and the touchdown pass to Will Shepherd was great. It was the right read. It was quick. It was decisive, so on and so forth. But the way Kentucky set up their safeties, they slid the safety to the 3-man side of the wide receivers, the 3-by-1, and they left Will one-on-one. So Will just runs a slant and Mike just throws it over the middle. Like, that was, that's some pitch and catch stuff. Mike still has to be smart. He's not. The other thing too, Chris, like, Vandy lost the turnover margin and Vandy lost the penalties.
Yep.
Like 7 penalties, 70 yards. I mean, I've not done the digging. I perhaps should, or you can do it. When's the last time Vandy won an SEC game when they lost the turnover margin and lost the penalty battle?
Well, it was at least 3 years ago.
Yeah, right. Yeah, at least. So you're going up against a team that has been fairly put together, and you've been a smidge sloppy with penalties lately. And Mike is really, really good.
And turnovers too.
Reads. Yeah, you've been a little sloppy in that area. And if you open up the door with those things against this level of athleticism, that's a problem. So, you're going to try to grind out 3, 4, 5 yards with Ray Davis and try to be about, 6 for 10 on 3rd downs again.
Yeah, you just made a lot of the points I've been hammering all week. I also think that Florida is a much better team than people think. Look at the computers and where they ranked them. I think they're a top 25 team, even though they're not ranked there. Now, I think in the season they might be. But anyway,
they got like an NFL guard, all that kind of. They got NFL guard.
Osiris
Anthony
Torrance.
Richardson is, Richardson might be an NFL quarterback. He's making his 12th start ever, right? Like, he's in the mix to get drafted wherever. The only question is, like, he hasn't played a ton. So, he was the backup to Emory Jones last year when we went down to Gainesville. Etienne's ripped off an 85-yard touchdown run against South Carolina, in part because the linebackers screwed up for the Gamecocks. But, they got pieces on the outside. Like, they're really good. I'm not saying Vandy can't win that game. Like, they certainly can. Florida's record is what it is, but they also beat Utah to start off the season, and Utah is pretty darn good too. They just have athleticism out there, which is no surprise. It's a Florida team, but the thing that they're coupling the athleticism with is, generally speaking, clean, disciplined football.
This season of the Vandy Sports Podcast has been made possible by my friend Dr. Jody Jones, DDS. When it comes to general or cosmetic dentistry services, Jody is the best in Nashville. Just check out his client list. It testifies to that. He sees movie stars, music stars, athletes, coaches, you name it. Jody is the dentist of choice for stars in Nashville, but he sees regular folks like you and I as well. What people love about Jody's office is the ambiance. It's relaxing. It's friendly. Someone described it to me as a tooth spa. Whether your needs are general or cosmetic, go see Jody today. Call him 615-270-2322. See him at 55 Music Square East, not far from downtown or the Vanderbilt campus. Jody is a former Vanderbilt football player and a huge Commodore booster, so go and talk Vandy sports with him while you're there. Go see Jody Jones today. Thank him for his support of this podcast, because without it, this season would not be possible. Yeah, well, your thoughts on the win over Temple?
Oh. All right. A lot of things to like about the win at Temple. I think sort of like the football game. I think the resiliency, the stick-to-itiveness, the stay with it when Temple was able to force overtime was a really good thing from a team that needed that. The fact that Robbins was as active as he was in multiple ways, right? Not stepping out and trying to shoot three balls, but trying to post him up was really good. I continue to like the game as it settles down of Ezra Mignon. I think he's going to be a factor. I don't know how it totally comes together. He's been my most intriguing player to watch so far. That's a good Temple team. I mean, and that was a Temple team without a couple of players, and Dunn was hitting a lot of threes, and they were challenged, they were pushed to the limit. The team needed it. There's a lot to build into in a win like that, because it wasn't just Jordan Wright having a big game or whatever. It felt like you saw more pieces be contributors in that game as I watched it unfold. But they're also going to have to be tough and smart, and they probably should have closed that game out better. So it probably shouldn't have gone to overtime, but it did. So that's, two sides of the same coin there, I suppose, right? Learning to be a little bit more authoritative in finishing off a game. But at the same time, a team that had its confidence rattled through the first two, to find ways to get the win is great. And I don't know that we talk about this a ton. I actually enjoyed, I don't know basketball to the depth to be able to truly discuss it, but just from a intermediate knowledge level, watching some of the plays that Stack ran down the stretch to either try to get a shot for Jordan, try to get a shot for Liam, the game winner from Ezra. It was compelling basketball. I don't really have the right terminology to put on it, but just watching the players move on the court, I thought was creative and unique. And it was far more developed. It was far more thought out than give the ball to this guy and everybody clear out and it's an ISO play, which if you've got that sort of athleticism, knock yourself out. But it was way more in-depth and thoughtful basketball than just here's this little two-man game that's going to happen on that side of the floor,
Okay, let's get to the mailbag quickly. It is sponsored by Sutherland and Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt in an accident, give Taylor or Russell a call at 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. Okay, you hit most of this earlier, I think, or at least you hit it on some level. Knoxville Door 94 wants to know, how was it getting to call your first SEC win?
Great. Candidly, I mean, honest to goodness, I try to make as much about the players and the people that have been around longer than I have, and I could see kind of the A, disbelief, B, relief, C, joy on Norm's face when they won. So I think, I was happy for him. But, I took a moment too, the game was over. I was physically spent in the final, 5 minutes of that ball game. My breath was toast and done. So I had to step out of the booth and I just kind of decompressed for maybe about 3 to 5 minutes while the post-game show started up before I could catch my breath. It was great. I don't have the legacy built into that program in the same way that Norm does or others do, and I get that. But I wasn't here for all 26. But quick math, that was we're 1-5, 16. Oh, so I've been here for 14 games in the SEC. So I was 0-13 in the SEC. So that was nice. It was candidly nice, and I'm ready to turn the page and try to go get another one.
Yeah, I know someone who was here for all 26. It's made podcasting difficult. So
yeah,
in any case,
I've been on all sides of everything, Chris.
Yes, you have. All right, Believe 22. Does Coach Clark Lea's 6-16 record surpass your expectations for what he could accomplish in almost 2 full years? Why or why not?
Interesting question. So the pause is not because I think the answer is definitively yes or definitively no, and I'm trying to couch the answer.
Well, let me help you out a little bit here. These are complicated. I will say something, and you can agree or disagree. I don't think he is underachieved at a minimum.
Oh, bare minimum. I don't know what the record should be. I guess that's my point. The question is, which is understandably so. I get it. The question is based in a number. What's the record? What is the expectation of the record through 2 seasons? And again, this is not I'm on the inside and you're on the outside or whatever. It's just when you're around the stuff so much, you learn the pressure points, and it gives you a different barometer for what expectations are. There's so much that needed to be addressed with the football program. So much from, it's what's funny to me is, and this is just a straight comparison point. It's not to talk about other things or not Vanderbilt or whatever. It's so Justin Fuente, who I worked with for a couple of years at Virginia Tech, was on the Doug Gottlieb podcast, and he was kind of talking about, he's going kind of back through post-mortem of what his experience was like, and he's talking about we were understaffed in recruiting, and we were we were behind in facilities and so on and so forth, and you could tell that's sort of where his pressure points were as a football program. And I'm not saying Virginia Tech should be held up to some sort of ridiculous standard or whatever, but their fan base shows up regardless of if you win or you lose. They played a bad game against a bad team not too long ago, and it was bad weather, and there was still 40,000 people in there. So you can, from afar, my point is this, from afar you could see Virginia Tech as being X thing, and Fuente thought it was lower than that. Well, whatever people thought externally of Vanderbilt football, there's so much, even mechanically, underneath that it's just norms comparison all of the time is they're building a house, and they walked into a situation where either the house wasn't even built, or there was foundational issues, and they had to gut the place, and they had to start the remodel and all of this sort of stuff. And it's a long answer to say I appreciate every pressure point that Clark has had to deal with, from figuring out the best way to schedule practices here, to try to change psychological mindsets of a team that has been doing nothing but losing and actually expecting to win for the first time, perhaps since they played high school football, to elevating the talent level, to trying to get talent to overachieve. We talk about assistant coaches. Look, I don't know if this is taboo or not, but getting assistant coaches to come to Vanderbilt strikes me as a challenging thing. You are by definition taking a flyer on someone that's an up and comer that you believe is good, but probably isn't going to have the track record because, and I don't mean it disparagingly, but taking a job at Vanderbilt right now with the talent level in this conference is a risk. It's just your reputation in the coaching community has to supersede the potential results that you might get, right? Because it's going to be tricky. You could be the world's best coach and you could still go 500 because the talent level is not where it needs to be. There's so many pressure points, right? That's all I'm saying. So
no, I get it.
Think,
yeah.
Right. There's so many pressure points. I think he has done really, really well so far. It has to continue to grow. He knows that. More than anything, the talent level has to be augmented. Like, you've got to sort of live with recruiting classes kind of where they were last year. You're still going to be at the bottom of the SEC, but at least you're in the top 30, 35, top 40 of the country where you can develop it better than other people. And you still have facilities issues that have to get taken care of, and money that has to be raised to fix the stadium and fix the indoor and fix the basketball and fix so on and so forth down the line. I think he has done such a wonderful job building the program up. And I'll tell you, this will be my last thing. I love when he says that I'm not going to lower the standard of this program, or we're going to be the best program in the country. Not in like the Alabama sense, but in the sense that we're going to compete every single game. We're going to challenge this conference, and we're going to do it in a way that is befitting and upholds the reputation of Vanderbilt. We're going to create a complete football program in ways that other places don't necessarily do it. And I know it got banged and it got hit publicly. But if you're here internally, why wouldn't you want that? Why would you not want a coach that says, I'm going to strive for the absolute pinnacle? And I think if Clark has done anything so incredibly well here, it's say, this is my standard, and I'm not going to budge from it. We've got to get to it in a long, winding road, and we're going to get to it in a way that is befitting of us. But this is still my standard. So I think that's sort of what I've appreciated and felt like he's hit and exceeded expectations with. Like, he knows who he is as a football coach and a person, and he is going to slowly and meticulously bring this thing to that level. Does that make sense, right? Like, I didn't give you a clean answer. I get it. But there's so much to unwind that you have to start by saying, I'm not going to lower my standard. So, and I'm not going to like berate people to get to my level instantaneously. He's going to massage it in a certain way that gets it there. But he hasn't bent. And I think that is through 2 years of plenty of losing and tough challenges. I think that's pretty impressive.
Well, and to sort of buttress what you said there, before I ask you one final question and get you out of here, you've almost always got to know the backstory of what he's walked into. And look, they are not the only program that's like that, but the backstory is making my dog's ears hurt. I don't know if you can hear that.
I think it's probably made plenty of people's ears hurt over the.
Oh my goodness, this dog! I do not understand how he can be as loud as he is at times. That's through a closed door. You're hearing that. That's like he does that 4 or 5 times a day. Sometimes he does it in the middle of the night and wakes us up. It's crazy. I don't know what that's about, but but it's yes. Anyway, couldn't get through a podcast without a word from Oreo.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I've lost my train. Oh, I know what I was going to say. This probably happened at Tennessee. It probably happened at LSU. But the backstory of what he walked into and things you would never know to look for, things that he probably can't and shouldn't talk about publicly, and how hard it is. And even if he did talk about them, and it would probably make people feel like he was giving excuses, but they're just things and situations he walked into that you'd never dream you're dealing with at a Power 5 football program that he was. And getting his kids to believe and buy in week in and week out, to me, has been the most impressive thing he's done.
Yeah, I think so. And that's not without its hurdles. And it's not without its, stock market like movement. It's not linear movement is not how progress works. So I'm with you on that. I keep coming back to the fact that this is what Clark believes this program should be. He's going to maintain that standard. He's not necessarily going to let people deviate from it, and it's still going to take forever. Right? Like the way that Vanderbilt is going to do this, and the mechanics of the internal stuff demand it. It's just going to take time, which is a cruddy answer. But I would much rather Clark build it like this rather than the sugar rush. The sugar rush is fun, by the way, but there's also a crash. And I feel like people understand perhaps a decade ago when the crash hit.
Yes.
So
I was here for the crash.
Yeah. I mean, the sugar rush is fun, but there's also a crash. So.
Okay, last one quickly. I don't know the answer to this. Maybe you do. Ann Arbor Door says, I enjoy your podcast, Andrew. What's the theory about Dukanich is wearing number 80? Tim Corbin said he wanted 84, but told him to take 80. My theory is Tim thinks that giving him the number will motivate the kid in a constructive way.
I don't have the answer to that. I've talked about it a couple of times on the fall ball games and broadcasts. It's noticeable that Dukanich wears number 80, right? Like it does not go unnoticed. I suspect that question will get asked at some point as we get closer to the season. And I don't know. You would have better context on this than I would. It doesn't feel like Coach Corbin necessarily hands us over a list of numbers and why he gave it to him, right? Like that sort of feels like a personal thing sometimes. But it's certainly, I am right there with the question. It is noticeable that Dukanich wears number 80. Exactly why? I don't know. And I don't know if he asked for 84 first or whatever. I don't know how or when they arrived to that number. But when he takes the field and he's wearing that number, we all see it. So, and Tim is, if nothing, hyper calculated. So I'm sure there's a reason, and I'm sure it did not get lost on Tim that he's wearing the same number as Rocker.
Andrew, thanks so much for your time. Have a happy Thanksgiving if I don't talk to you between now and then. And thank you so much for joining us today.
As always, Chris, it's a pleasure.
All right. We'll see you soon. Thank you for listening to today's episode. We thank our presenting sponsor, Jody Jones DDS. We thank our other sponsors, Sutherland and Belk and MyPerfectFranchise.net. If you're interested in sponsoring this podcast, and that's how we make this work, please email me at chrisley70@gmail.com. We also ask that you subscribe to our website, vandysports.com. That is $99 a year. You get things there that you don't get here. And of course, please rate, review, and subscribe where you see our podcast. That helps us get noticed. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at vandysports.com. Follow me at chrisley70. And finally, subscribe to our Vandy Sports YouTube channel as well. Thank you for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast, which is part of the 440 Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee. We'll catch you with another episode coming very soon.